Joining me now is Republican Congressman Tom McClintock, along with Van Jones, a co-host of CNN's Crossfire. He worked in the Obama administration. Congressman, you saw this latest video that they're calling Flames of War. Recent polling shows 94% of Americans say they know about the beheadings, and that is because of the ISIS videos. So are videos like these pushing the United States towards a war and perhaps putting U.S. lives at risk?
Well, I think if we've learned anything over the past 13 years, it's that if we ever put our young people in harm's way, we owe it to them to back them with the full might and fury, resources and commitment of the country. And I don't see the consensus there either throughout the country or within the administration to sustain what would be required for a war of that magnitude. I think the President's right to order select air attacks where we have resistance forces that are in direct confrontation with the Islamic State, where we can turn the tide of battle we can. And should, but I think that anything further than that, we have got to do a very serious gut check as a nation and as a government as to whether we are willing to put the resources behind what would be necessary to provide the support to our troops that we have denied them these past 13 years.
And, of course, this is the big question about ground troops. But, Van, you know, when the President has been making his argument to tell the nation that this is a threat and that the United States needs to do something about it, he has been doing so in language that is eerily familiar to President George W. Bush in the run-up to his war against al-Qaeda. Let me play it for you.
The United States of America will continue to do what we must do to protect our people.
All nations should know America will do what is necessary to ensure our nation's security.
ISIL is not Islamic.
The face of terror is not the true faith of Islam.
It will take time to eradicate a cancer like ISIL.
Americans should not expect one battle, but a lengthy campaign.
If you threaten America, you will find no safety.
These enemies view the entire world as the battlefield, and we must pursue them wherever they are.
That's eerie, Van.
Well, sure, but that's also about where the similarities end. This is a very different situation. Before, you had Iraq as a stable dictatorship with no weapons of mass destruction, no role in 9/11, and we went in with ground troops. This is a different situation 13 years later. It is an unstable country. It's actually being overrun by terrorists. You have something even worse than al-Qaeda there, and the President saying no ground troops. I think that's important. Also, I think it's important for people to realize today was a historic day. Congress acted normally. There was bipartisan support for the President, bipartisan opposition to the President, and we are actually now functioning like a normal democracy. We don't have lockstep opposition to everything the President does and this partisan gridlock. That's important. The other thing that's important we haven't talked about, 50 countries are standing with the President, standing with the United States against these butchers. That is also an important deal. The reason I think people are concerned, though, is when you start talking about training folks on the ground in Syria, there's concern there may be blowback. Who are these people? That's a real concern, but we're making progress as a country.
All right, and I want to talk about that. There were people who voted against arming the Syrian rebels today on both the Republican and Democratic side. Congressman, you were one of them. You voted against arming the Syrian rebels, as Van's talking about today's vote. And I want to ask you, though, because it's not just the President who says that arming the Syrian rebels is the right thing. I had General Stanley McChrystal on the show. He obviously led the counterinsurgency in Iraq. And I asked him whether he thinks the U.S. should arm the Syrian rebels, and I wanted to play you his answer because he didn't try to sugarcoat it, but he said yes.
I think it's a necessary move.
Even if those weapons end up in the arms of a group that wants to use them against the United States?
I think it is. I think clearly some of those will, but I think you must take that risk because look at the alternative of not doing that. You leave a vacuum and you leave them in a position where they won't be major players.
Congressman, why is the general wrong? Why is the President wrong?
I think it's going to come back and bite us. Don't forget the Free Syrian Army that we're now arming is a marriage of convenience among various Islamic factions that have a long history of collaborating with the Islamic State. Furthermore, their central mission is not to destroy the Islamic State. Their central mission is to destroy the government of Syria, which, despite its despotism, is actively engaged in attacking the Islamic State. I think we're making the same mistake that George W. Bush made in attacking Iraq that Van Jones mentioned. As despicable a dictator as Saddam Hussein was, he was not responsible for anything that happened on 9/11. He was not harboring weapons weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
And when we in there and destabilized it, we created the vacuum. I think that arming the Syrian rebels has exactly the same potential. I think that those American arms could very easily be turned against the Syrian government, which would actually work to the Islamic State's benefit, or could be turned directly over to the Islamic State, as we watched the carefully vetted Iraq army do just a few weeks ago with American arms. That's why the Islamic State is armed to the teeth with American equipment.
They do, of course, reportedly have very significant American weapons. Thanks to both of you. And out front next, America's top military leaders